Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Batra. This is our last class of this Masechet, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 169 through 176. And if those of you who are interested, we are having a panel discussion after this. There is a link in the chat. I'm sure it will be recorded, so those of you who have missed it, I'm sure you can catch it another time, but we are going to be discussing lessons from this Masechet. Okay, let's get moving. Daf 169. We're talking about a document of sale, and if it was lost, we can write a replacement document, right, that says you bought this piece of land, but not for the guarantee. If you remember, we've learned that, let's say there is a loan, and a loan is taken out with a guarantee of, let's say, a piece of land, and that piece of land from that date on has a lien on it, which means that if it is sold, the person who buys it realizes that if the borrower, right, who's the seller of the land, if he reneges on his loan, the lender can come and seize the land from him. So the Gemara tells us that you're not allowed to have two documents for one field, right? So that if a creditor wants to come and collect the land, we want to make sure there's only one document that he can use to collect the land and not more. Also, if you have a document for collection, it has to be torn up when the person collects the loan, right? Because again, we're concerned that if you don't tear it up, the person might try to collect a second time. The Gemara asks, why can't the court write a new document with the guarantee and write that any other document is invalid, right? This is the new document. Anything else doesn't work. And we say because we don't require writing a receipt, right? Meaning if there is, if let's say a person pays back a loan, it seems that we don't require the person to write a receipt. So therefore, if he has two documents, he might come and collect twice. Again, the same idea. In general, the Gemara says, no, we do need to write a receipt. But here, if there isn't a receipt, the land could be repossessed, and then the buyer's going to go, and now he has two documents that he can go and collect with those documents. However, with a loan, a receipt would help because you know that the lender prefers money. Remember, with a loan, a person borrows $100. The lender wants $100 back. He doesn't want your land, right? So with a loan, the buyer of the land is going to check, right, with the lender and see, did you get paid back or not? But with the sale of a land, again, a person always wants the land back and not the money. Okay, the replacement deed, let's say you write a new deed, it says you can't use this to collect land that was sold, right? And therefore we see that it's a replacement document, or maybe you don't have to write it, right? It's only to prove that you own the land, but you can't use it to go and collect a new piece of land. So the Gemara gives a case that a woman sent someone to buy land for her, and he bought it with a warrant, without a warranty, right? Again, there's a guarantee that, let's say I buy this piece of land. Let's say this piece of land is a guarantee for a loan. If the creditor comes and takes this land, I want to have a warranty that says you get money back, right? Or another piece of land. Now, this person bought her a piece of land without a guarantee. And then she took him to court and she said, listen, that's not what I wanted. So he was told that he needs to buy this piece of land from her without a guarantee and then sell it back to her with a guarantee, right? So he now takes responsibility for that land. When someone gives a gift with a gift of a piece of land, and they give it with a document, right? This is the bill of, right, that says, right, the title to the land. So then you imply that as long as you have the document, you have the land, and therefore there's a machloket that if you hand the document back, did you just return the land or not, right? Is it connected to that document or not? Another case, a person lived on land for 3 years and he also had the deed. And then there's a machloket, what's stronger as a proof that he owned the land? Is it the chazaka, the fact that he lived on the land for 3 years, or is it the document? Okay, so Daf 170 tells us maybe the machloket is based on if you have the deed, right? If I have the possession of the deed, it shows that I own the land, right? And therefore, whoever has the deed, he's the person who owns the property. Okay, let's go back to witnesses who sign a document, right? If one of the witnesses becomes invalid on a document, but a valid witness was there to see the delivery of the document, it's a machloket. If you remember, this actually goes back when we talked about the get. If you remember in Gittin, we talked about what makes the get valid, the witnesses that signed on the document, or the witnesses that brought that were there to watch the giving over of the get, right? And here too, that's the machloket. If it's enough to have a witness see the delivering of the get of the document, maybe that's enough, and you don't need all the signatures on the document to be valid. The Gemara says no. Everyone agrees that if there are invalid witnesses on the document, even if a valid witness saw the giving over of the document, it's invalid because the document itself has become invalid. The machloket is when there are no signatures on the document, then it depends, right, what validates the document, right? Do we need to take it to 2 witnesses to sign the document, or is it enough to just transfer it with 2 witnesses watching that transaction? Okay, if the borrower agrees that the lender has an IOU, but he already paid it back, right? He says, yes, I did borrow $100, but I gave it back to you. So now you have to certify that document to see if it's valid. Or maybe we just say what's called yachloku. We split it, right? So if I owe $100, right? Again, person says I owe him $100. I say I pay it back. So we say, no, you know what? 50-50, right? So you just divide it. Okay, right? And here the Gemara discusses if a person made a superfluous claim, right? They didn't have to say anything, and then they did. Maybe that person doesn't need to support the claim that they made and the document that we are talking about. Okay, the next Mishnah on the bottom of Daf 170, if a person paid back some of the loan, right, partially, you should write a new document that says, right, instead of I owe you $100, now you write I owe you $50. Or maybe you keep the original document, but you write a receipt, you paid me $50, and then you keep the original document. And then the borrower has a responsibility to keep the receipt. And it's in the lender's advantage, right, to hold on to the original document. Okay, so now the Gemara explains that the court rips up the original document and writes a new one and they date it to the date of the first document. Because again, remember, there's a lien on property from that original date. Daf 171, it tells us that witnesses don't have the right to rip up a document and write a new one, only the court. The witnesses can write a gift document, right? Again, if someone's giving a gift, they can keep writing a new document because there's no guarantee there. You're just giving a gift. Okay, and then there's a breita that says that no, actually witnesses can write a new document with the old date if the person paid back half of the loan. Or, again, as we said, no, you have to write a receipt because, again, it creates pressure. Again, if the lender has the original document of $100 and the borrower has the receipt, so the lender can say, listen, if you don't pay me back, then I'm going to collect $100, right? So it's used to pressure the borrower to pay back everything that he owns. Now the Gemara says, what if the document is dated to Shabbat or Yom Kippur? So then we assume that it's a post-dated document and it's valid, right? Meaning we assume that nobody would write a document on Shabbat or Yom Kippur, and we say it's post-dated, right? They wrote it on Wednesday, but they post-dated it to later on. Or maybe it's invalid because that's not a valid date on a document. If a person paid back a loan in full, right? So now again, you can't, so one opinion is you can't give a receipt and not tear up the document, or maybe you can, right? Again, there's a machloket if you have to tear up the original document or not, right? Let's say the lender says, I lost your document, so I'll just write you a receipt. No, right? We say that's not okay. Another opinion is that is okay. Now we're going to talk about the dates on documents, right? So a pre-dated document is invalid, but a post-dated document is valid, right? Again, this is for loans. Don't forget, because again, there's going to be a lien on the property, and we want to make sure that the date is accurate, because what if you change the date and I bought the property the day before, so I wouldn't know that there was a lien on the property. For a sale, they're both invalid, right? Because again, I want to know exactly when the sale took place. The Gemara says nowadays we do write post-dated documents and we write receipts. Okay, right? And the receipt needs a date. But even if there isn't a date, it is valid because it means that you did pay back the loan and the money that you owed. Daf 172, the rabbis instituted safeguards to protect people, right? And the Gemara says, you need to write a receipt or you need to tear up the document. If you don't follow the advice of the rabbis, that's your loss, right? Meaning these are all practices that are meant to help everyone, right, be able to recover their money, be able to pay back loans. If you don't follow the advice, it's your loss. Okay, so then the Gemara says you should write the date of the transfer, or at least the date that you're writing the document, right? Again, it could be that I got the money on Monday, but we only wrote the document on Tuesday, or vice versa, right? So you have to make sure that there is a date written on the document, and you have to write the name of the place that the loan took place and where the document was written. A person has, right, let's say a person has a loan document for $100, and then he says, you know what? Can you just write me a new document with like two different documents that say I owe you 50, right? So we say we don't listen to him because again, it's not good for the lender and it's not good for the borrower, right? And we also, if you have two documents of 50 and you want to combine it into one, we also don't listen, right? We don't want those documents to be changed. Let's say you had a document of 100 and you wanted to replace it with one of 50, right? Meaning like, it's fine, you only have to pay me back 50. We also don't listen to him, even though it benefits the borrower, because we don't want to change documents. As soon as you start changing documents, we're going to come into problems, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, next Mishnah. A father left a bathhouse and an olive press to his sons, and he had one rich son and a poor son. If it was something that was rented out and they were collecting money, excuse me, excuse me. Okay, wait, hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Still getting over my cold. Okay, so if they're renting it out and they're going to get the money, so then that's great. They split the money that's coming in. If it's for private use, the rich brother can say to the poor brother, I don't want to, right? The poor brother is going to want to sell it because he can't use a bathhouse and an oil press. He doesn't have olives, he doesn't have servants. It's not useful for him. So he wants to sell it. The rich son says, well, I don't care, I want to use it. So he can't force the rich one to sell it, even though the poor brother can't use it. Let's say, so the Mishnah continues, if there are two men in town that have the same name, right? Yosef ben Yaakov, and they live in the same city, they cannot write loan documents for each other because we're not going to know who owes who money. And a person can't collect money from them because we don't know which Yosef ben Yaakov they borrowed from. And if they do, they should write the name of their grandfather, right? Yosef ben Yaakov ben Yitzchak, because the chances of 3 generations being the same is very slim. Or they should write some sort of siman, right? The tall one, the short one, the black-haired one, or write the Kohen or the Levi, right? Write something that will tell us who the person is. So now the Gemara explains, right? Let's say a document said, I borrowed money from you. And there's no name, right? It doesn't say who they borrowed from. You can't prove based on the person who's holding the IOU, right? Again, in general, the IOU, the person holding the IOU is the lender. But if it just says IOU, I don't know who lent the money. Maybe I found it on the floor, right? So let's say, and now we bring it to the case of a get, right? You find a get that has witnesses but no date, right? If it says today, so then it's valid because it's saying today, right? So it's valid because today is the day that my wife brings this to court. As soon as she brings it to court, then that's the day that they get divorced. So maybe the document that says IOU is valid to whoever is holding it, right? Maybe it's like if you write a blank check. If you give a blank check, whoever has it wins, right? So we say no, right? Again, with a get, remember we have the case of witnesses have to see the transfer from the husband to the wife. But with an IOU, you don't have that. So maybe, right, again, maybe you just found it on the floor. And the Gemara says, no, we're not concerned that maybe you found it on the floor. Only in the case of, right, again, people who have the same name, that's when I'm concerned. And then what's the chance that Yosef ben Yaakov is going to find Yosef ben Yaakov's document on the floor, right? What, again, the chances are pretty slim, and therefore a regular IOU anyone can use, even if it doesn't have their name. But again, these two people with the same name, that's already complicated. Daf 173, right? Again, these two people, they can't write an IOU to other people. And now we have a machloket if you can transfer a loan by just giving the document. Again, as we said before, is there a power to just having the piece of paper that says I owe you, right? So if I just give you a blank check, right? Well, maybe, sorry, if I give you a document, not a blank check, but a regular check, but I give it to you, maybe you have the ability to collect that money, right? Again, maybe anyone who holds that, right? So the Gemara says everyone holds that you can transfer the loan by giving over the document, but there's a machloket if a person needs to prove that he now owns the loan or not, right? Meaning, how did he get it? Okay, next case, there's a father who died and the brothers didn't divide the estate. And then one brother brings an IOU from the father, right? The father had this IOU and he brings it to court. So how did he get it, right? He just took it. So he needs to prove that the father or the brothers gave it to him. And maybe only in that case, that's when you need to prove it. But in a regular case, you don't need to prove it. Because again, like the brothers don't want one brother taking from another brother. Okay. Another Breita says that, again, those two Yosefs can write a document for each other. And this is based on a machloket if you can write a document without the lender present, meaning whoever's holding the document, he's the one who is owed the money. And it doesn't matter which Yosef it is. Okay, if a borrower found the receipt that Yosef paid back, right? So now both loans are seen as paid back, and you can't collect from either Yosef. Again, if it says, I owe Yosef ben Yaakov $100, I don't know which Yosef ben Yaakov. So if I find one receipt, it cancels both loans, right? Let's say I took a loan from both of them. I cancel both loans because you can't prove which one was which. Okay, second. Next Mishnah. A man tells his son, one of my documents, right? I have a whole file of IOUs. One of them was paid up, and I don't remember which one. So then we see all of them as being paid, right? And then the father died. We see them as all paid because we don't know, right? If you have two documents from the same person, then the bigger loan is considered paid back and not the smaller loan. Okay, so the Gemara says, right, again, let's say if you have something that says your debt is paid up, right, all debts are canceled because we don't know which one was paid and which one wasn't. Okay, next Mishnah. A person lends money and there is a guarantor on the loan. Okay, this is called an arev. Arev means a guarantor, someone who says, right, if Reuven can't pay back the loan, I will pay back the loan. Okay, so now, okay, the Mishnah says, if a person lends money and there's a guarantor, the lender is not allowed to collect from the guarantor. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. If a person says, I'm lending you money so I can collect from the Arev, so then he can collect from the Arev. I'm going to say Arev, it's a shorter word than guarantor. So it means the same thing. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you can't ever collect from the Arev if the borrower has property, right? You can't skip over the borrower and go to the Arev. If there's an Arev for a ktuva, remember, the husband says, if we get divorced or I die, right, I promise to give you 200 zuz, and if I can't pay it, so Reuven is going to pay it, right? He's the guarantor. So if that's the case, and they get divorced and he can't pay, so the Mishnah tells us that the husband needs to make a vow that he cannot benefit from, that the wife can't benefit from the husband, and then they can collect the money from the Arev. Why? We're concerned that maybe the husband and the wife are in cahoots together. And we're going to see a story about this in a minute, and you'll see what happens. So now the Gemara tells us an Arev only guarantees a loan if the borrower can't pay back the loan, right? You can't jump over the borrower and go straight to the Arev. Or you can't, right, again, you can't go straight to the Arev, right? You have to go to the borrower first, but then afterwards, right, if he can't pay, so then you can go to the Arev and the Arev has to pay. Yehuda says that, wait one second. Okay, so now there's a case, right? Yehuda says he's going to be the Arev for Binyamin. But this case is something new. This is called a kablan. Kablan in modern Hebrew, it means a contractor, but a kablan here means it's a guarantor that takes on more responsibility. So we're going to see that the kablan, maybe you could actually go straight to the kablan instead of going to the borrower first, or maybe he has just more responsibility. So in Mishlei, it talks about an arev, and if he doesn't have any money, right, again, if the borrower doesn't have any money, the arev has to pay for him. Maybe he doesn't really think he's going to have to pay, right? If you've ever had a friend who says, "Oh, can you come and sign on my rental agreement? I need a guarantor," and you're like, "Sure," but you're like, "I'm not paying your rent," right? Meaning the question is, how much did the person take? What kind of responsibility did the person take upon themselves when they signed the contract? So one opinion is he didn't really think that he was going to have to pay for it, and that's called an asmachta. If you remember, we've seen this before, right? There's a machloket. If I didn't really think that I was going to have to pay, so is it binding or not? Now, again, I signed on the contract. So one could say it's binding, or one can say, but I didn't really think that I would have to pay, and therefore it's not binding. Or another opinion is it's not an asmachta, that the person gets a benefit by seeming trustworthy, right? Oh, I'm like co-signing on your loan. And therefore, because you get a benefit of feeling trustworthy, you now have taken responsibility to pay for this loan if the borrower cannot pay. So the Tanna Kama implies that the lender can go to the Arev first, right? If he says you can collect from whoever you want. If the borrower has land, so we say no, you have to go to the borrower first. Again, obviously, if the borrower has money, that's the best. Let's say the borrower doesn't have any money, then you can seize property. Now, if he doesn't have any property, now you can go to the cosigner, right, to the Arev. But if he's a kablan, you can go to him first. Daf 174, Rabban Gamliel says, if he's a kablan, so you still have to go to the borrower first, but now he has more responsibility. And here the Gemara speaks it out, right? The language, first it says, what's the language for an Arev? The language is lend him money and I'll pay you back, right? Or I'm liable for that money, but it's lend him and then I'll be responsible. The language for a kablan is give him the money and I'll be responsible, right? When you're saying give, right, it seems like it's going through you to the other person, right? It's more responsibility. Then there's a machloket. What if you mix up the words, right? What if you say lend him and I'll be a kablan, or give him and I'll be an arev, right? And then there's a machloket if anytime you use the word kablan at any point in the statement, then it's that you become a kablan, or right, anytime you use the word arev, you become an arev, and it's a machloket, right, which one trumps the other. Okay, And then the Gemara tells us, right, that a person's own property is the guarantor for his own loan, meaning a lender can't just come and take property from the borrower without asking for money from the borrower. Again, right? The borrower owes $100. He can't just be like, oh, I'll take half of your backyard, right? You have to actually say, do you have the $100 that you owe me? If yes, give it to me. If not, I'm taking half of your backyard. Okay, so okay, so now we have a case of the arev of a father, of a person. Then that person, the father, dies, and we have the orphans. Now, we've learned before that there are different types of loans, and do orphans have to pay back the loans of their father? And if if they do, so okay, and if they don't, what happens if the arev of that loan, right, now pays back the loan and then comes to the orphans and asks for the money, right? If they didn't need to pay it back, so then they don't need to pay the arev back. So here's the Gemara, right? So the Gemara says the guarantor of the father paid back the loan for the orphans, and then he comes to the orphans and says, okay, pay me back. So they don't have to pay him now, only when they grow up. Again, the orphans are minors. They do not have the mitzvah to pay back the loan, and therefore they don't have to pay it now. But, right, or he can demand payment from the orphans if it's a loan that they were supposed to pay back. If the father admitted that he owes money, then the orphans have to pay back the loan, because let's say they have a document and it's owed to the guarantor for paying back the loan. Let's say the arev paid for the loan, and it was a loan that was owed to an idolater. So now we assume the father didn't pay it back, and the orphans need to pay the arev back for paying for the loan. Now we have a story about an arev for a ktuva. And as we said, this could be like a way to make money. Right, so here, Abaye's, right, basically, hold on 1 second. Is this the case? Right, basically, the father-in-law was an arev for his son, for his son. A father was a guarantor on the ktuva for his son. The son was a student, right? Someone who sat in kollel all day and he didn't have any money, and he was married to his wife. And then they're like, oh, how about you pretend to get divorced, and then the wife will go to the father-in-law and ask for the money, and then you'll get remarried and you'll have money. And then the Gemara is like, no, that's not how we do things, especially if the person was a Kohen, right? He cannot remarry his wife, and that's not something that we do. An aside was, well, really the father always wants to give his son money, so this maybe is a good way to get the money, but then the Gemara said, no, that's not a good thing. Okay, a kablan for a ktuva, he would have to pay anyway. Again, remember, he has more responsibility, and that's maybe he has to pay no matter what. Or another opinion is only if the groom, the husband, had property to begin with, and then he would have to pay for the loan, for the ktuva. Okay, in all cases, a person takes responsibility to pay back, right, to pay if he's an arev or a kablan, except for an arev on a ktuva. Because here the Gemara says that the arev on a ktuva is basically saying, don't worry, just marry him. Don't worry about the money. It's all going to be okay, right? Meaning we know that, especially in the times of the Gemara, a woman was always looking to get married, and the person was just like, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And they didn't really feel that they were going to be responsible for paying for the ktuva. Again, I'm talking about the arev. I'm not talking about the husband. Obviously, the husband has an obligation to pay for the ktuva. So I'm just talking about the co-signer. Okay. If a person says, I owe money to so-and-so, if he doesn't say, give him the money, we don't believe him because maybe he's just making it up so people think that he has a lot of money. People think that he doesn't have a lot of money, right? Oh, I might have $1,000 in the bank, but 500 of that I already owe somebody else. So don't think that I have a lot of money, right? Or, right, he doesn't want his children, right, to think that they're going to inherit a lot of money, right? Okay, Daf 175. Right, again, if it's a verbal loan, then the children are not obligated to pay back that loan, right? Meaning the orphans are not liable to pay back a verbal loan, period. Okay. Okay, let's say a shchiv meira, if you remember our shchiv meira, the person who is on their deathbed, and let's say he says, I owe money, and the orphans say, no, we paid it back. So we believe them. If he says, give the money, and the orphans say, we paid it already, we don't believe it, because when a person says, give him the money, it means that it wasn't paid, right? It doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. Because why, if the orphan said that they paid back, why would we not believe them? So the Gemara says, no, this is the case. The father said, I owe money, and then the orphans say that the father retracted his statement. So then we say we believe them. But if the father says, pay money to so-and-so, and then the orphans say he retracted it, we don't believe them because in general, a person doesn't say pay money mistakenly, right? If like they can forget, oh, do I owe him? I don't remember. But if he says give them the money, so then we assume that he still owes the money. Okay, and as we said before, the shchiv meira, the person who is on their deathbed, they do not have to say, you are my witnesses. It's very clear whoever's there is witnessing it, and they do not have to write anything down. Whatever they say is taken seriously. Okay, last Mishnah of the Masechet tells us, when a person lends with a document, you can collect from any property that was on lien from this document, right? So any property sold after that, the date of the loan, this is called land that is mishuabadim, right? They are like mishuabad. They are I don't know what the word is, a guarantee under warranty, right? They're connected to this loan. If you only lent money with witnesses, meaning a verbal loan, so then you can only collect from property that the person currently owns. This is called bnei chorin, right? They're free. If a lender has the document and it says that the borrower owes him money, again, he can only collect from bnei chorin. Thank you, legally bound. I like that. Right, so a lender who has like an IOU can only collect from property that the borrower owns, right, that is free, right, bnei chorin. An arev, right, our guarantor, whose name is after the witnesses on the document, you can only collect from bnei chorin, from property that they own at that time, or not even, right? You can't collect anything from that guarantor. Only an arev that is responsible if he agreed. One second. If he agreed to be an arev, when is the arev responsible to pay? If he became an arev at the time of the loan. Therefore, the name has to be before the witnesses. And then the Mishnah ends. If you want to be smart, right? If you want to be chacham, then you should learn monetary laws, right? Dinei mamonot, which is what we've been talking about for 100, more than that, right? All three of these masechtot, that is monetary law. And why is that? Because it's like an overflowing spring or ever-flowing spring. And if you want to learn monetary laws, then you should serve with Shimon ben Nanas. And we'll see Shimon ben Nanas was very in tune with the things that needed to be done in terms of monetary law. Okay, so now the Gemara says, according to the Torah, all loans can be collected from land that is bound, right? Legally bound, even a verbal loan. But the rabbi said no, because if you just borrow money, hey, can you lend me $100? Nobody knows that you lent me money. But if I go to the scribe and I have it written down on a document, already people start to know about it. Or the opposite, maybe according to the Torah, you can only collect from b'nei chorin, right? Free, right? Property, whatever you own right now. And the rabbis added that you can collect from this legally bound property so that more people would lend money, right? Again, we want to make sure that people are lending each other money. If I say, listen, don't worry, if the person sells the land in the meantime, don't worry, you can still collect it. There's this guarantee, there's like a warranty, then people will be right, will be more open to lending money. Okay, a verbal loan cannot be collected from heirs. Remember, we said the orphans don't have to pay from a loan that the father took without any document, or from buyers, right? If someone bought the land, or maybe you can, right? It's a machloket. Okay, let's go to Daf 176. Right, an oral debt can be collected from the heirs, but not from the buyers of the property. If a person's signature is authenticated in court, you can still only collect the IOU from, again, b'nei chorin, right, property that he owns right now. Then the Gemara tells us about 3 different types of gets that are invalid, but the reason it mentions this is that if we have a document that is unsigned, but it's delivered with witnesses, you still can collect from the legally bound property because the borrower agreed to that, right? Or the person agreed to that arrangement. An Arev who signed above the witnesses, you can collect from, again, the legally bound property. If he signs below, then only the land that he owns right now. And then the Gemara ends by telling us that even though Rabbi Yishmael praised Ben Nanas, right? The halacha is actually like Rabbi Yishmael. So I think I'll say it the other way. Even though the halacha is like Rabbi Yishmael, he still praises Ben Nanas on his, legal mind and knowledge on these like loans and all monetary issues. And then the Gemara gives a case. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see a person beating up another person, and he's like, "You owe me $100. You owe me $100." And the person is like, "Stop beating him up. I'll pay the $100." So now we say, did the person really mean to pay the money? Right? Or was he saying like, oh, no, don't worry, just stop beating him up, right? And here the Gemara discusses, right, how much responsibility is the person taking for the other person. And here, right, the Gemara ends by talking about arevut, about someone being a guarantor for the other person, right? And this idea that an arev that's made by the court doesn't need to do any kinyan, doesn't need to do any action to become responsible. An arev at the time of the loan also does not need to do a kinyan to be responsible because he's taking upon himself to be an arev. But if an arev after the loan does need to do a kinyan. And with that, we finish this masachet. We do have I would say like 5 minutes left. Wait, I did see a question. Hold on 1 minute. What if a secular court orders a different judgment than a Beit Din would do for the Jew? But okay, it's a great question. We are actually going to talk about that. It's actually a great question because it leads us to the next Masechet. The next Masechet is called Sanhedrin, and it is all about the Jewish court system. What do courts look like? We have mentioned it a little bit, but it's an excellent, Ilanit, thank you, an excellent segue to our next Masechet. We're going to learn about the judicial system, how many judges you need to sit on what type of court, what about witnesses, what about capital punishment and other kind of punishments. So we're going to learn a lot about that, but it is an excellent question, right? Can you go to a civil court, right? In the Gemara, we did talk a lot about the non-Jewish courts and how, I don't know why I just did that, right? But the non-Jewish courts and what does that mean, right? Do they have power over us? I think it depended on, right? Again, we also have the concept of dina de malchuta dina, right? We have to abide by the laws of the land that we live in, right? So if you go to court and they say you have to pay back $1,000, you're not allowed to run to a different country that doesn't have extradition and be like, oh, no, Jewish law means I don't have to pay, right? If a civil law, a rule says that you have to pay, right? So it's an excellent question. We definitely prefer going to a Jewish Beit Din over a civil court, but yeah. But we'll talk more about that next time. Anybody have, I have like 2 more minutes. Anybody have, I'll tell you, if you're, I hope you come to the next, I hope you come to the panel where I'll be giving some more thoughts. But if you don't, I'll just give you one thought, which I thought was very interesting. If you remember the beginning of all the Babas, right? We had Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, and Bava Batra. So if you remember Baba Kama, we talked about in the beginning, right? Injuries, people doing damage to one another. So we started this whole journey with people being a little violent. Baba Metzia began with 2 people fighting over a talit, right? It's mine, I found it first, right? So they're not hitting each other, but they're still fighting. Our Masechet Bava Batra, if you remember, it started with building a wall between neighbors, right? As they say, good fences make good neighbors, right? Where there's this idea of let's keep things separate so that we can live together. And I think what's really fascinating is our Masechet just finished with the concept of arevut, right? Arevut means, right, I am taking responsibility for you. Right? Not only am I not fighting with you, not only am I not arguing with you or building a fence between ourselves, but I'm actually saying, I want to help you, right? I see that you can't pay your loan. I'm going to take responsibility. And I think it's like I don't know, I thought it was like a cool idea that we finish all 3 of these masechtot with, you know, the lesson of having to take responsibility for one another. So those were my 2 thoughts. If anyone wants to share any thoughts, I have a few minutes. I'm going to drink some water. Anyone can share their thoughts as well. Anybody have thoughts?
This was fantastic. What an experience to go all 3 of them. Metzia, Basra. And I am so excited about Sanhedrin. I have been waiting,
Me too.
holding off. I was most interested in that when we began on January 5 of 2020, but I held off because I wanted to do it at the right time. So I'm very
Amazing.
excited.
I am so excited. I'm so excited. Yeah, we're coming up to 5 years. 5 years we've been doing
Yeah.
this.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable.
Well, thank you that you stayed more than 3 months. Thank you.
You should know that I told them I would only do this for the first 3 months.
I know, you told us, and I'm so thankful you went on.
I get to
Thank you.
count 3 months differently.
I really
That's a good thing for us.
enjoy your summaries of the week. I listen to Daf Yomi. I watch it every day, and then when you give the summary for the week, it's really amazing. I learn something new every time.
Thank you. I'm so happy. And I'm happy you joined us for this.
Yeah, I can't join for 9 o'clock, but I will join. I will watch it tomorrow probably.
Okay, great.
I also want to thank you for your excellent summaries.
Yeah.
And they're so concise, especially with these 3 Masechtas, because there's a lot in every single daf. And I know it is to try to cram even one daf into like an hour and 15 or an hour and 20 minutes, let alone a whole week's worth into 45. So what you do, I have great admiration for, and I admire your skill, and I appreciate having it in the world, and many people will be benefiting from the recordings as well.
Bezrat Hashem.
Years to
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
It means a lot. It really means a lot. So I thank you very much. Wishing everyone a huge mazal tov on finishing these amazing, very challenging masechtot. And looking forward to seeing you next week at our regular day and our regular time. So wishing everyone.
And there was
Yes.
one thing I wanted to say. It was like Tikkun Olam, going through all 3 of the Baba, from all 3 of them. It's like Tikkun Olam, you're putting the world back together.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
Hazak, hazak, Vanit hazak.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everyone, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat